and raising the consciousness of thousands of black workers. Of course, you know, black workers haven't been the only people who have been exploited in American society. In this country, you know, they've been, you know, like the foundation stone of it. The vast majority of people in this country, vast majority of white people in this country are workers, overwhelming majority. And they're exploited similarly to black people. You know, they may not work as hard, the exploitation may not be as intense, but they're still the same being exploited. And generally they know that they're being exploited.
You got it right now. Do it on this one, you got more wires.
I'll play that. Do it better on this one.
I worked in all these factories around here for Chryslers, Dodge Main, Diesels, Fords, practically all the shops there are in Detroit. All I got out of it was a living. And that's about all any man could get out of working by the day is a living.
I got a job in Cadillac on the assembly line, and I was swinging this there rear end of a Cadillac under those springs, 42 an hour. And I quit smoking because he didn't have time to light one.
I was a steward at that time, and they'd had the line speeded up on one floor, and you'd go up there and you'd talk to the foreman, and he'd slow it down. You go down, turn your back, go downstairs, come back up in 10 minutes, he had to speed it up again. Well, what are you going to do? They just want to run that thing the way they want to run it themselves. But the ownership benefits by it. The ownership only.
And I said, you take that goddamn job and shove it. I walked out of there, I can't never work for General Motors anymore. They got that on my record again.
And I left Huntington, West Virginia in 1942 and came to Detroit. I came up to Detroit because there was no much work in the South in Huntington, West Virginia, so I come up here for better wages.
Talking about the South being poor, you talk about the North, go through the South. You see some of them people living up in the hills. Down South, you didn't make it. Worked 6 days a week, right, that man carrying hide, tending bricklayers, and made $19.80 in 1940. And he made $50 up here washing dishes. Was a lot of money. The most money I ever seen in my life.
As far as I'm concerned, the poor man's been poor all of his life, and the rich man's had it. So you can't take it away from the rich man, but he got it off the poor man. That's the reason why they got all the richest they got. They work it for nothing. That's the reason why they got all the money. And to this day, we'll still be under that if something ain't done about it.
Everybody is almost in revolt in this country, and I think we're entitled to more money. We should get it just the same as everybody else is getting their share of the loot. Certain groups are, there's no question about that. Colored, for one, and ADC, and so forth and so on.
There's a lot of confusion amongst white people in this country, amongst white workers in this country about who the enemy is. The same contradictions of overproduction, the same contradictions of increasing production are prevalent within the white working class. But because of the immense resources of propaganda, publicity, you know, radio, television, journals, magazines, and so on and so forth, which can be drawn upon, white people tend to get a little bit confused about who the enemy is. If you take a look at, you know, white workers in Flint, for instance, in the automobile industry, who are pretty hard pressed because the Buick plant up there is whipping their ass. You know, and it's whipping their ass about twice as hard today as it was 5 years ago. But who do they think the enemy is? You know, the nigger on the street. You know, crime in the streets, you know, was a problem. Or black people, you know, moving into our neighborhood, causing housing prices to decline and threatening to rape our wives and daughters, you know. And as a result, you get a cat like George Wallace who comes along, and George Wallace is not the first of the populist fascists in this country. And George Wallace talks about how the big, fat cats of Wall Street are messing up the country. It's the little man that's suffering because of, you know, the big, rich financial bears of Wall Street in conjunction and in alliance with the niggers. And the white folks, the white workers tend to buy that shit up. They tend to eat it up. They tend to love it. That's not in Birmingham, Alabama that I'm talking about. That's in Flint, Michigan. As a result of that kind of thing, you know, millions and millions of white workers in this country just don't understand what's going down and end up becoming counter-revolutionary, even though the contradictions which they face every day would say that they should be the most staunch revolutionaries. Black people represent, you know, the most forward and progressive and militant movement inside the plant, you know, which are calling not for, you know, I mean, in reality, you know, they ain't calling for the destruction, you know, of, you know, the white working class. The demands which are being presented, you know, are demands which are calling for an uplifting of the working class as a whole. And the actual fact of the matter is that the movement of black workers is a class movement that's calling for a total change in the relationship between workers and owners altogether. And what it's saying is that certainly we don't want all the shitty and lowest paying jobs in the plant. Certainly we don't want to be, you know, most exploited people in the plant. And we aren't calling for anybody to be exploited. We're calling for the elimination of exploitation in the plants. We're calling for the elimination of racism in the plants. We're calling for the elimination of any kind of conditions inside of the plant, you know, which are bad, you know, for the basic, you know, health and enjoyment, you know, of life. You know, we are not calling for the replacement of the black proletariat, you know, with white workers, you know, who happen to be in a higher stage in the ladder. We are not calling for a situation in which white oppressors will be replaced by black oppressors. We are calling for the ending of oppression altogether. You know, basically the reason that they're racist is because of the fact that they're afraid, you know, that the little bit of niche that they got in society is going to be lost. But ain't nobody been trying to demonstrate to them that rather than being against the black movement and being enemies of the black movement, that they should be in favor of the black movement and supporters of the black movement, because the things that the black movement is doing inside of industry are basically in their interests. The kinds of demands and the kinds of movements, you know, which black people are making inside of the plants are not inimical to the interests of the average white worker.
My father